Hey guys, what you're about to watch or listen to is a previous conversation I had with Dr. Marie Agnew. So, Dr. Marie Agnew is my personal doctor, and I brought her on again today to speak to you guys. And what I want to do is republish these previous conversations I had with her so you could get more depth and go a little bit deeper into this information. At TPM, we teach 5 territories: self, health, wealth, relationships, and business. And this is going to be the health component. What we found is for a lot of us and our families, health just seems to be missing. We put it on the back burner. And so I wanted to bring these back for you so you can do a deeper dive with Dr. Marie Agnew and get your health corrected. So enjoy this episode.
Functional medicine is really a way to broaden the lens. So when you see a GP, oftentimes they are going to focus on the symptoms, and usually there will be a treatment for that symptom, but sometimes they don't have the time or really the system in place to look at, well, why did those symptoms happen in the first place?
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Today, you guys are going to be pumped. I have Dr. Marie Agnew. Now, Dr. Marie Agnew is a functional medicine doctor, but she's much more than that. In fact, she's somebody that I turned to for my health last year. And we were so lucky to have her here with the men from the Inner Circle. And if you don't know, the Inner Circle is one of our highest level mastermind groups where guys contribute a decent amount of capital, but certainly a decent amount of time to up level. And we bring the best of the best together. And Marie is just one of those people. She is the owner of Shift and is a functional medicine clinic with other practitioners, including nutritionists, that are going to guide men like us and our wives through a practice to make sure that it's holistic in nature, that it's taking care of the whole body, inside and out. And not only that, but she is a mother, a wife. She's got 2 kids, and she is an outdoor enthusiast, mountain biking, snowboarding, doing all the fun stuff, it seems like. So Marie is going to knock down for us today things that we need to know as busy men and as busy family members of what we get to do with our health. Thank you so much for being here, Marie.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I have to say, I love what you guys are doing. I love the mission that you have. I see women in practice often, and they are often reporting that they feel lonely, or they feel almost abandoned by their husbands. You know, their husbands are bringing home money, they're provided for, but they feel like they just want more. They want more relationship with their partner. And I love that you guys stand for, you know, the husbands being more present, more present with the family, with the kids. I think it's just such a great mission. So thank you for what you guys are doing.
Well, thank you. Yeah. We got a great group of men.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of women that listen to this show. So we get them writing in too. It's pretty funny. And just as a service announcement, we do get a lot of single women asking. We don't have a directory where they can find some of these guys.
You should probably start one.
Yeah, it's been a thought. Well, you've been such a great help along my journey as we go through. And I've talked about this on the show. Last year, it became so important to me to grow this movement and to get it to the place where it is today that I put a lot of things on the back burner, knowing it was going to be a season for me going through. And you came in as somebody to walk me along that journey of getting things back. So I really appreciate what you've done for myself, for my family. My wife says hi to you and thanks as well.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It was a joy to work with you. And at the time, I mean, like you said, you were working so hard on building the business. A lot of people I find, when they focus just on the business or on other things, they can really leave their health kind of to the side. And it can be a process to get back, right? So I appreciate how hard you worked. You really were very engaged and fun to work with.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, let's first talk about what the heck is functional medicine and how is that going to differ from my GP?
Yeah, good question. So this comes up a lot. Functional medicine is really a way to broaden the lens. So when you see a GP, oftentimes they are going to focus on the symptoms, and usually there will be a treatment for that symptom, but sometimes they don't have the time or really the system in place to look at, well, why did those symptoms happen in the first place? What is the environment that caused that symptom to occur? So an example might be, let's say somebody comes in with a chief complaint of insomnia. So a lot of people struggle from insomnia.
Sure.
They go to their GP. They might be offered a medication. They might be even offered supplements, but really that symptom is going to be focused on. And there might not be a conversation about why did that insomnia start in the first place? You know, what is your workout. Like, how are you moving your body? What time are you moving your body? How much caffeine are you drinking? How late into the day are you drinking that caffeine? What type of nutrition are you taking in? Are you on screens before bed? Are you stressed before you go to bed? Really, what is the environment in which that insomnia started in the first place? And with functional medicine, we're able to really look at all of those systems and really ask those questions about why is this starting in the first place?
I love that. I love this approach so much. And some of the guys know my previous life, I was in the health and wellness field for almost 2 decades. And a lot of what I did was research during that time. And, your holistic approach, and one of the reasons I approached you is really important. So I'll talk to the guys. As you know, us guys don't tend to go see a professional.
No.
We have to have like an arm severed.
Yeah, pretty much.
We think we could super glue it back on. But I'll ask the guys often, like, hey, most of the men that watch this are businessmen and investors. And if you had $1 million racehorse, would you feed it fast food or would you feed it premium food? Would you allow that $1 million racehorse before going to a race to stay up all night, or would you make sure that its stall was comfy and warm? And the answer is obvious, right? Obviously, you're going to feed it the best food. You're going to make sure it's in a stress-free environment so it can perform. You're going to make sure it gets rest. Yet, we don't do it ourselves. Why do you think that is?
I think that a lot of times the focus will be outside. And I think that a lot of times there's so much focus on the business and all the other outside things that we can kind of lose track of ourselves. And, it might be a week or 2 weeks, and then suddenly we get out of the habit of taking care of ourselves. And then the narrative changes. So I think that really focusing on the day-to-day, and then also not letting ourselves get too caught up in when habits start to change. Because, how do I say this better? So when people start to feel guilt and shame over maybe having some habits change for the negative, then it becomes kind of a snowball effect. And if they can catch that inner narrative and really say, all right, so, maybe I had fast food last night. That was a mistake. I don't feel great today, but I'm not going to repeat it. I'm not going to do it again. Keep that narrative really positive, and then that helps with the habits to be in a better place. So I really think it's a focus issue, but also a self-narrative issue.
Yeah. Sometimes I think that as men, especially, and I'm not saying women don't have this too, I think women do, but men in particular, we think that our self-worth is in our ability to provide, right? And so our constant focus on business, providing, and competing, and so then we look at our health, we don't actually pay attention to it, it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it be our weight's an obvious one because you can see it in the mirror. Right. And over time, a guy looks in the mirror and goes, oh, crap. I look horrible.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah. But then there's the inner health. Right. And as men get older, they start to notice these things because we've seen our fathers and people around us, prostate cancer, heart attacks, strokes, and things of that are more traditional. What do you think it takes for a guy to get to the point where they're going to seek out a professional like you and look at this holistically to make sure that they're moving forward?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think historically you're right. I think there needs to be a severed arm or something very major that's popping up. But I think that, having the outlook of how do I change my health trajectory? So 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road, I'm in a good place, and realizing that what you do now influences that. So I think having that in mind can be really helpful. I think also framing it as when you take better care of yourself, obviously you feel better, you have more energy, and then you can better show up, for your kids, with your family, with your friends, your community, in your workplace. So knowing that it's not a small thing. It really does, influence all areas of your life.
It does. And we'll get in, I want to get into the particulars. I just want to set the groundwork for some of the guys here. My frame of reference is always a couple things. One, I'm competitive. I like to be active, but I also want to be competitive in business. And I know that if my body's trashed, that's connected to my mind,
100%.
My attention, my focus, and the healthier I can be inside, the better I can perform in the boardroom.
Absolutely.
And the bedroom, which is important to a
Absolutely.
lot of guys as well. Well, all the guys, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
And then another thing that's important that I'll talk to some of the men about when they're on the fence, Marie, is like my daughter's turning 4. We talked about this. She turns 4 on Monday. I want to be able to walk her down the aisle. I want to be around, and I don't want to be that dad that's like, oh, I just can't because, I don't have enough energy, or I can't do that because of whatever reason. I want to be the dad that's there, that's present, and that's able to go snowboarding or skiing with her 20 years from now, let alone 5 years from now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even thinking about the grandkids someday. I mean, that's important too, right? You
Yep.
want to be able to get on the floor and crawl around with the grandkids, do all the things. And so I think that perspective is really helpful. And I would be curious what you think. I mean, why is it that a lot of men really aren't as proactive as women? Because we definitely see that in my practice.
Oh, I can tell you exactly what it is. It's exactly. So we were talking about how many people watch these shows, and it's a lot of people download because we can see the statistics.
Yeah.
And I can also tell you that most of the men watching this are on the fence about joining a program like The Powerful Man or another one. That's why we always tell them join anything. Mm-hmm. It's the classic thing that guys don't ask for directions.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Guys don't ask for help. The ironic thing is the men that you see successful do.
Interesting.
Right? Because they set their ego aside and they move forward. You see this in business all the time, right? Yeah. The most successful CEOs that I know are guys that surround themselves with smart people and ask for help and don't pretend like they know everything.
Yeah.
I think the issue is as men, we've been so conditioned to try to figure it out ourselves because we think in our psyche, subconsciously, we've been programmed that it's a sign of weakness if I don't know the answer. Yeah. It's a sign of weakness if I need help. Yeah. And therefore, coming to someone like yourself and being proactive about my wellness could be seen in one paradigm, the older paradigm, as I'm showing that I'm weaker or I'm not strong enough. When the truth is that vulnerability of asking for help is the hardest thing. And when you do that, you're showing you're actually really more powerful because you're taking it into your own hands and you're being proactive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also just so interesting. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit, I don't know if jaded is the right word, but I definitely feel like it's just such interesting data to get about yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of guys, so we have a lot of men who come to the practice because their wives tell them to come.
Yep.
So that happens a lot. But once they get engaged and they start seeing data come through, it's fascinating. So
when you were here and we'll go into some of this, but when you were here with the men from the inner circle,
that was so fun, by the way.
It was great.
It was really
such
fun.
A great group of guys. Yeah. And most of them, in fact, all of them, are still doing the things that you and your colleague recommended.
Right.
And it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And a couple of them took deep dives in that. So guys, to give you an idea, Marie was here and she went over all the diagnostics. We'll talk about those in a second with the men, and they absolutely ate it up and they loved it. And they've told one guy in particular has totally done a 180 with his health and wellness. Beautiful. And it is. And I mean, I've seen him unfortunately with his shirt off, and he looks amazing. So, but that's the outer health, right? Yeah. It's the inner health, the calmness I've experienced from talking to him, my interactions with him, the way he feels about his body, and everything else that's going on. And that's really the true measure at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and that also is what will be sustainable. I mean, your inner narrative, how you feel about yourself, that will inform having good habits stay around.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the diagnostics and what that you would go through if I was to see somebody like yourself, or if I was to go to shift your practice. What are some of the diagnostics that you have men go through typically? Men and women, of course.
Yeah, so typically we'll start with a pretty broad lab analysis. We're going to look at things such as, sex hormones, so testosterone, DHEAS. We'll even look at progesterone, estradiol, which many women know are important hormones, but those are actually important in men as well. And then we're also going to look at iron levels, things like homocysteine, inflammatory markers, different nutrient status markers, fasting insulin. So we're getting a good gauge of blood sugar. We're going to look at markers for liver health, kidney health, electrolyte status. So we're getting a really good baseline set of data so that we can see, is there anything missing? Is there anything suboptimal? So we can really replete or treat that. An example might be, let's say somebody is deficient in vitamin D. So if they come in to see us, they might be feeling fatigued. Maybe their immunity is down a little bit. They're getting more sick than they typically would. If we didn't catch that, we would be hitting a wall later on in all the work that we would be doing for optimization. So it's really important to do those baseline labs first. And then oftentimes we're going to start with a gut microbiome test. And the reason we do that is with functional medicine, we really believe that the gut is the root of overall health. So the gut influences energy, nutrient absorption, our cognition, our sense of well-being. I mean, a lot of our serotonin, which is a feel-good hormone, is actually secreted in our gut. So we start with this test oftentimes. It's called the GI map, and it's actually PCR technology. I don't know. I don't want to get too into the sciencey weeds, but I find it interesting.
Yeah.
So what that means is it's basically DNA amplification. So it's very sensitive, very specific to what is actually going on in the gut. There are a lot of tests out there that I would argue don't really give you clinically actionable data, and this one really does. So
I found it fascinating, Maria. I mean, I helped write a textbook in my 20s on performance nutrition. Nice. And then when you and I'm only sharing that because I know better. And then when you gave me the results, that the vitamin D was a shot. I know because I was super low in the vitamin D scores and a lot of other things. But what I found was with the gut microbiome, there's so much research now about how that not only can affect our mood, but there's theories out there that are pretty well researched that the gut microbiome can control our actions, our thoughts,
Absolutely.
and the way that we actually maneuver, to the point where people are like, hey, are the actions and thoughts we're having really our own, or is it actually the microbiome inside of us that's actually doing this?
Such a fascinating topic. There's more and more research coming out about that, and it's so interesting to me. I mean, when you think about the amount of bacteria and just overall bugs, really, I mean, viruses, fungi, there's a lot going on in our biome.
Yeah.
And our biome, not to get too into the weeds again, but it's everywhere, not just our gut, but in our nasal passageways, on our skin. It's everywhere. So
it is crazy. And I remember one of the things is I just came back from Cuba with 40 some guys, and you did a test on me for parasites and everything. I was kind of hoping I had one for an excuse, but
I actually get that a lot.
I'd imagine so. You kind of want to blame something else other
Absolutely.
than my poor choices of eating nachos and drinking beer. I want it to be this other thing. That's the problem. Turns out it wasn't, unfortunately. But I found it fascinating because you're really getting a diagnostic. So as a businessman, I get a report every day, and certainly every week we go deep into the analytics of the business, the data. How are we doing from a marketing, whether it be acquisition, whatever is going on. And as a business owner, you should be diving deep into those.
Absolutely.
What you provided for me specifically was a deep dive into the holistic parts of me. And one of the things I thought was really interesting, that was all interesting, and I can't remember what it's called, so I'm going to ask you to do it. Yeah. But basically, it was my waking cortisone levels? I can't remember exactly what happened.
Yep. Cortisol awakening response.
Okay, cortisol waking response. And to give you guys an idea, you're basically like, hey, this is a problem. Like, if you don't take care of this pretty soon, this is going to be a different kind of problem that you're not going to come back from.
Yeah. So, I love this topic.
It was a wake-up call for me.
It really, there's a lot of literature coming out about this. So the cortisol awakening response, CAR for short, is basically when we first wake up, we should have a really good, robust boost in our cortisol. And let me just back up and say cortisol is one of the Goldilocks hormones. So it should not be too high. It should not be too low. We really want it to be right mid-range. But we want a specific, basically, pattern to the day. So we want a really robust response in the morning, a high inclination of cortisol, and then we want it to go down gradually through the rest of the day. And this really sets the stage for good, strong circadian rhythm, so getting good sleep. It also sets the stage for good energy and mental clarity. So a lot of people, when they've been really, working hard, doing all the things, maybe have a lot of stress, sometimes what will happen is there's a negative feedback loop that happens because they've had such high cortisol throughout the day sustained. The body basically says, hey, this is too much cortisol. I don't want any more of this. And there's a negative feedback loop that happens, thus blunting the cortisol awakening response. So then instead of having this nice mountain in the morning, people basically are just flatlined through the day. And that really can cause a lot of fatigue, like I said, sleep issues. There's actually literature that supports it also can blunt one's libido at times. There's a lot that goes on with cortisol awakening response. So
I mean, I definitely can tell you from the flat line of energy, and I got to imagine a lot of guys watching this know this cycle that I was caught in. And Maria, I was caught in this, I've been in this cycle, or I was in this cycle, I should say, for probably most of my adult life, which was wake up in the morning, have a bunch of caffeine. When I was in my 20s, it'd be pre-workout drink, right? Because that was more of what I was doing. And then at night, you have something to sedate yourself, a drink or two with the buddies, to make sure that you fall asleep. And a lot of people are doing medication, so self-medication or otherwise, to calm yourself down. And then what happens? You don't have a quality night's sleep. So you wake up in the morning, you need that caffeine to get you back up, and you go back down. And so it's that kind of self-regulation loop that comes in effect, which isn't helping the body, right?
Not at all. Not at all. And a lot of times too, when people drink alcohol at night, and trust me, I'm one of them or have been historically, it really interferes with deep sleep too. So you wake up feeling horrible and then you're just pounding coffee to try to get energy. And then you're really caffeinated, and it's a cycle people get caught in. So
oh yeah, the anxiety and everything else that comes with it.
Yeah.
So we're going through it, and I was looking at it, and what I thought was really interesting, and because I already know some of the guys watch this, we have a lot of doctors that watch this too.
Oh, great.
I had a doctor friend of mine work out who specializes in performance with athletes,
Wonderful.
and it was almost, it was a week after you and I spoke, and I brought this up. I was like, hey man, like this is really eye opening to me. In this response, and he goes, "Oh, shoot it over to me," and I shot it over,
Great.
and he said almost verbatim what you said,
Mm-hmm.
and he added one more thing. He's like, "Doug, I see this all the time. You've got like 5 years. If you don't change this around, you're gonna be dead." I was like, "Whoa,
Whoa, that's a big statement."
so that's kind of what Marie said, but she was nicer about it. and that's a testament to you and what you do.
Yeah.
Is I think looking at it from this holistic perspective, it really, because you also said, hey, look, you have this going on, and here are some reasons, and here's some things we could do naturally, and also with supplementation and meditation, all the things we teach the men to do. Combine those, and you can reverse this and change this around.
Absolutely. And you feel so much better.
Yes.
I mean, it really is something that changes fairly quickly for people, and they just feel so much better.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
What are some of the, we talked a little bit about gut microbiome, and I know we can dive into this deeply.
Oh man, I could talk for days on the gut microbiome.
and I would listen, and they would too. And in practice, we'll have you back for a more in depth. I'm really curious what the guys want to dive into here. What are some of the? I mean, you know, the men that we work with,
Yes.
the avatar, if you will. These are all great men. They're high performers. They're providers for their families. Most of these men have a story like I do of like, I can pull myself up my own bootstraps. I'll figure it out, and they'll work. What are some of the common things that you see after their wives send them in, or what have you? Hopefully we'll get more guys to come to practitioners like you around the world. And I know you can work with people all over the United States.
Yes.
And you've helped some of the guys that came in were from UK and Canada to the Inner Circle event. You helped them as well. What are some of the things that you're seeing these men come in with? What are the reasons, the real reasons that they're coming to see you?
Well, again, 95% because their wives bring them in.
Yeah.
But I would say the other percentage is usually gut symptoms,
Okay.
feeling, I mean, not to get too graphic, but a lot of bloating or heartburn, reactions to foods. They're not sure which foods, what's going on. Sometimes, difficulty with digestion. So they might be constipated. They might have loose stool. There might be something going on there. And then sometimes just not feeling as sharp as they used to. So they're noticing things like brain fog. They might be in a meeting and they're searching for words in front of their team, and it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
So they really want to optimize more of their brain function and their cognition. I'd say those are the top things. We get a decent amount of men with insomnia. So, just can't get to sleep like they used to, or they get to sleep and then they wake up again, 1, 2 a.m. and their mind just starts ruminating. We see that a lot too. We see some men for sports performance. They're athletes. They are maybe just not performing as they used to. So they want to work on things like energy, mitochondrial health, and things of that sort.
And I had all those. So I was either the easiest person to work with or the hardest. I'm not sure which.
You were pretty easy to work with. But just because you're so engaged, right? That makes all the difference when people really want to be engaged.
Yeah.
So,
and I definitely do. And I have a lot of follow-up questions on me, but that's for a different time. Yeah. And so we see that coming in. So men coming in, I know a lot of these guys are like, oh, wow, the brain fog kicks in. And one of the things that you told me was through the test, you said, Doug, look, I'll back up. One of the things I really respect about you, and there's a lot of them, is you offer suggestions, not a mandatory, you need to do this thing.
Absolutely. That's important. I mean, people need to be engaged, but also willing to do something. If I just sit here and give you a list and say, okay, do this, this, and this, and I don't check in if it's actually doable or something you want to bring into your life, that's not helpful.
Yeah. Oh, and it was. I remember you telling me through my exam, and a lot of the guys will get this, there's a lot of naysayers about gluten sensitivity.
Yep.
My wife has been gluten intolerant since I've known her, and she'd had to find out the hard way, but if she has gluten, she's out for a couple of days, and I've seen it happen.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it really hits. She's not celiac, but it really hits her hard.
Yeah.
And I remember coming back to the house after talking to you, and I was like, yeah, Marie said I need to cut out gluten to see how it does. And she looked at me and goes, I told you so.
I told you this years ago.
it kind of was what it was. And she's like, every time you go out or drink beer or you eat too much gluten, you have stomach issues, right? And things like that, gastrointestinal issues. And I was like, do I? As a typical guy, I don't pay attention to those things. But I did know when I went through an elimination diet, I noticed when I started adding foods back in, I could tell a reaction. And I was like, oh, wow, this has become or has always been an issue that it wasn't aware of. And I wonder how many of the men listening to this, myself included, we don't know what issues are within our body because we're so used to putting up with them. To us, it just becomes the regular set point, and we don't realize there's a more optimal version of ourselves waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. And I would say that that's common across the board. We see that with women as well.
Yeah.
You know, they might have a low level of fatigue or brain fog that they actually didn't even realize that they had. They thought it was just who they were, or even they'll blame it on age.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. And so the elimination food plan, it's really a good way to systematically figure out what foods might be causing inflammation in your system. And so it really is the gold standard. You know, I always prefer that when people are willing to actually do that food plan to diagnostic testing, because the diagnostic testing actually isn't that accurate always. And so the elimination food plan is also a really good way to get that biofeedback in your body. It's really powerful to, let's use corn, for example. Cut out corn for 3 weeks. You might feel, oh, you know, I have less brain fog. I feel more energy. Re-add it into your diet. And then suddenly you're noticing, oh, wow, that actually the brain fog, the lack of energy, everything came back. And when people feel that in their body, as opposed to seeing it on like a lab printout, it's that much more powerful. So I definitely prefer to work in that way.
Yeah, and it's smarter. I mean, it's the logical way. It's kind of like I want to lose weight. So do I take a weight loss drug, or do I actually tie my running shoes on and go for a walk, right?
Oh, yes.
The walk could be harder. And the problem, I think, what happens with our society, Marie, is there's billions of dollars of marketing to sell us the quick fix.
Yep.
So I would bet that most of the men watching this have tried a neurotropic of some sort. Something to help their brain function, a pill or something. But they don't know that, hey, it could be a food that you're eating could get, you know, that neurotropic probably is BS, but maybe it's okay. Maybe it gives you a 1%
A little
increase.
bit, even if it's placebo.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it could give you a 1%, 2% bump.
Yeah.
But changing your diet from a diagnostics, changing some of your habits might give you a 10, 20% bump.
Absolutely.
It just
or
takes,
more.
yeah.
I see some crazy things.
Do you?
Yeah. I had this patient one time who actually had a previous ankle injury, and she would actually get really bad arthritis in her ankle. And she cut gluten out of her diet. And I also want to give the disclaimer, I don't believe everybody should be gluten-free. It's just one I see often. And she actually, the arthritis completely cleared up. And then when she had gluten again, her ankle started to swell and feel painful again. Just crazy stuff that you would not expect.
I believe it wholeheartedly. And I read so many articles myself, being interested in nutrition and other performance enhancing. You see people that cut out grain in particular seems to be a big one for a lot of people.
Definitely.
I still eat gluten, but I can tell a difference when I eat a lot of gluten versus some here and there. It's just a big difference with my body and how it reacts. My joints get I feel older.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I just feel older, almost arthritic, if you will, because I'm still doing CrossFit. So I'm getting in there. When I don't, and I actually clean up my diet, I focus on my sleep, I perform. I already told everybody I'm competitive. And so I want to be competitive when I do something. So I just feel better about myself. Which transfers over to work. It transfers over to my life, my kids, my wife, etc.
Yeah. And, I should really back up and say that oftentimes the food sensitivity discoveries that come out of this, it's not usually a life sentence. So, I mean, in your case, you did a lot of gut healing work. I hope it's okay to say that.
Yeah.
So, after that, you can become more tolerant to things that you used to react to previously. And there is something called leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability. And that really is the explanation for this phenomenon. Is it okay if I talk about that for a little while?
Yeah, these are grown adults.
I mean, well, it's also like nerd speak, so I don't want to go too into the nerd language.
Go for it.
Okay. So on the gut lining, we should have really tight junctions. And basically, smaller food molecules should basically go through those junctions into our bloodstream when we digest food. With increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut, what happens is those food junctions are much more wide. So bigger food complexes actually seep through that gut lining into the bloodstream. And then the immune system sees these bigger complexes and realizes, well, that shouldn't be there. So it attacks. And so that causes more of an immune response, increasing inflammation. So somebody with leaky gut oftentimes will feel like they're reacting to everything they eat. And so the treatment there should not long-term be, well, just don't eat those foods, because pretty soon they're eating, 3 foods that they don't react to.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is actually heal the gut, heal the intestinal permeability, and then increase their diet.
I think that's what happened to me. And as I reflect, I'm listening to you talk about this. I put pieces of this together. So I lived in Santa Barbara for 20 years, California.
I love Santa Barbara.
Yeah, it's a great place.
Such a beautiful spot.
And so if you go meet for someone, so if you and I were to go meet in Santa Barbara, we go get a glass of wine, right? That's just what you do, coffee, wine. Then I moved to Central Oregon where I live now. Let's go meet for a beer. I gained 20 pounds like almost overnight. Literally.
Those IPAs, they'll do it.
They're amazing. Like you go get a haircut here, they give you a beer. I was shopping for a pair of jeans, they gave me a beer. I was like, this place is awesome.
This is great.
But I think I really reacted. I became very gassy. My wife. That's what my wife was saying about the gluten. Like I can tell. So all of these things happened, and since working with you and going through the protocols that you recommended for me and do the elimination diet, now if I go out and have a beer, no problem. If I have 4 beers, the problems start to come back a little bit. But I noticed that difference, and my body really responds differently depending on what I'm doing. And I'm just talking about wine versus beer, but you can put that through any other types of foods that you would eat.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you mind if I talk a little bit more in detail about what you had going on? Is that
No,
okay?
I don't mind at all.
Okay, you sure?
I don't mind.
Okay,
Yeah, these guys
okay.
might not want to hear, but I'm good.
I won't go into too much detail, but for you specifically, and we see this a lot, you had some bacterial overgrowth. And so with bacterial overgrowth, that bacteria is going to really react to things like gluten and things like beer. And so in basically seeing that level on that GI map, the test I was talking about, we were able to use some herbs and some specific things to decrease that bacterial overgrowth, therefore making it so that your gut could respond or not respond, I should say, tolerate more foods.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it made complete sense, right? I mean, essentially you're taking, and I'm going to dumb this down, so correct me when I get it wrong, because I will. but essentially you have a bacteria overgrowth. So you have an organism in your body that's being dominant that shouldn't be. And what you're doing is you're introducing another species and not feeding it, right? You're not feeding the food that bacteria likes, and you're introducing a new bacteria that's better for you. And it becomes more dominant inside your microbiome. And so you're basically getting the good stuff in, the bad stuff out.
Correct. And I would add to that, we're also giving you specific herbs to kill off the bacterial overgrowth. The other way that you described, that takes a lot longer, but that can be effective. I like to get results quicker if we can. So giving that herbs can definitely be very helpful.
Yep. And I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's perfect. And it worked really, really well for me. And I know it did for the other men that I talked to that were here for the event for the Inner Circle. So one thing that you've talked about, and I've heard other people talk about this as well, and you mentioned that men can increase their libido, right? Testosterone libido. And on the flip side of that, there's another coin that these guys would love to hear about, is that women come to you also for the same thing.
Yes.
We don't have to go into detail, but tell me a little bit about that and how that works.
Yeah. So I see a lot of women who they feel just really fatigued, quite frankly. They're maybe working full time, and then they're also moms, and they feel like they're constantly in their heads, right? They're constantly in the to-do list, or they're home with the kiddos, working in the home, and they're constantly just being pulled in every direction. And that brings them to really live more so in their mind and in all the things that have to be done, all the organization, the kids' lunches, the activities, just all the things, right?
Yeah.
And with that, they don't necessarily live in their bodies. And so they're not in a more embodied state. And there is some terminology out there where this is referred to as, more of a masculine mindset when you're kind of in that, to-do list execution mode versus a more kind of feminine embodied state where you're actually living more in your body. And I like to work with women, first of all, and, discovering a lot of the root causes of, well, how do we boost your energy? How do we get you feeling better? How do we build your self-confidence? But also, how do we give you specific practices to get out of your head and more into your body? And that can really help with things like libido.
Yeah, and progesterone and things of that
Oh,
nature.
that's massive. Yeah.
Well, I think what happens for a lot of people. So I'm talking to one of the guys I work with one-on-one,
Yeah.
and one of the questions I asked him was, has your wife had her hormones checked? Because he's describing this. I call it mother-whelmed. It's like overwhelmed as a mother,
Yep.
and going through. And it's not a coin I termed; it's something I've heard.
Yeah.
But and she's always tired. She always seems to have brain fog. The way he's describing it, and he's frustrated because when they have sex, it's good. However, it seems like her libido isn't there, and she'll even say this to him, like, "I want to have sex with you. However, it's just I don't feel up for it right now, or what have you." And so it's a guy. He's taking it personally, of course.
Yeah,
Like, what am I doing wrong? And I was trying to inform, like, it might not be anything you're doing, probably not. She's going through something.
Yeah, yeah. And these women feel so guilty. You know what they describe to me in practice? They feel like they are not showing up for their husbands that they love in a way that they really want to, and they feel so bad about it. And they want to change, and they don't have direction. They don't know how to. And I think a big reason for that is, yes, check your hormones, but also how is she moving her body? Does she have space to actually be with herself, or is she constantly with the kids and shopping and doing the to-do list stuff? Also, how is her gut health?
Yep.
How is her sleep? How is her cortisol awakening response and just overall stress hormones? I mean, there are multiple things that need to be looked at. It's oftentimes multifactorial. And I think a lot of these women too, they beat themselves up because they think it's just their fault, and they don't know that there's all these other factors that are playing a role. So really going through and addressing all of these things together is a good path forward for these women.
Oh, I love it. And I mean, guys, if when you're watching this whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this in the car, we're talking about the person that you love the most, right? And this is somebody you want to go see, somebody like Marie. It doesn't have to be Marie, but somebody like that can look at the holistic aspect of what's going on. Because I think just like men, women, I would assume, feel like, oh, this is just part of the aging process. This is just something that's happened, because it doesn't happen overnight, right?
Right.
It happens gradually. And that problem with that, like weight gain or anything else, is when it happens gradually, you don't see it till you just don't notice it. It's just part of who you become over time.
Absolutely. And the self-narrative follows. And I know you and I were talking a little bit about this, but I really, the more I work in this way with people, the more I'm convinced the self-narrative is everything. I mean, how our self-concept, how we see ourselves, is how we treat ourselves. And a lot of times, especially for these women, they have so much guilt and shame that their self-narrative is so negative. So really working to flip that, along with getting them feeling better about themselves, is really key.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get this study. I'm just gonna dovetail on that to double down what you're saying, so the guys get it. They did a study, and it was a double-blind placebo, and they gave, and I'm gonna get the study wrong, guys, so don't quote me on it, but you'll get the gist of it. And they gave both groups chocolate, and they told one group that the chocolate would heal them and make them better, and have more energy, and it was basically a health chocolate. The other group, they told it was classic chocolate. And they actually had different blood responses, blood glucose levels, and everything.
So cool.
The group that was told that it's a healthy chocolate, their health biomarkers all went up. The group that was told it was like more of a dessert chocolate, their health biomarkers all went down, right? And it was just simply the idea of what it could do for you, and just like the self-talk you're talking about.
Yeah, it really is powerful. And I mean, I'm happy there's so much more medical literature coming out on this.
Yes.
I mean, Joe Dispenza, I don't know if you've heard of.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much great stuff really showing the power of our self-narrative and how we see the world.
Yeah, absolutely. For a guy watching this right now who's got a wife who's fatigued, not feeling herself, isn't the woman that he married, like, and we're all different, and to think that your wife or your husband's going to stay the same person is ridiculous. We talk to guys about this all the time. Yes. And just so you know, one of the things we tell the guys to do is we teach them to decompress after work, but also to set the mood so there's a transition time for their wives to go out of her masculine into her feminine.
Beautiful. I love that you teach that. That's so great.
We do. We go into it. And the guys are amazing because they'll have groups and they'll share things that work for them. So drawing a bath for one guy's wife works for him, but it might not work for somebody else. And that's the power of the community these men have in our private community. They share everything from date nights to what works, what doesn't.
Great.
It's great. It really is. So they should be doing that stuff. But if they're doing that and their wife still feels like, I just don't feel like myself, what's the first step to helping her get back on track?
Great question. I would say, can I do a combination for the first step?
You can.
I'm going to cheat a little bit. I would say a combination of making sure that she has time blocked out in her schedule to basically do whatever fills her up. So we ask this a lot, specifically of women in the practice. What are you doing in the day-to-day that actually ignites you or makes you feel great? And oftentimes they're like, well, I work on my to-do list and I hit the gym, but the gym to them isn't fun. It's not filling them up. So specifically something that gives her joy. Or if she wants to just sit and stare at the wall, she has the freedom to do so. Because a lot of these women, they feel like they have to be on all the time. They're at their job or they're home with the kids and they're just constantly doing something. The kids go down and then they have all the laundry. It's a lot. So they need freedom to basically, I don't want to say rediscover themselves. That sounds a little cheesy, but in a way, like, all right, who am I? What is my I'm now wife and mom. Like, I need some time to figure this out. So that's big.
Yeah, I can tell you 90% of the guys listening to this don't know who they are.
Yeah.
They just don't know who they are.
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
that's why they focus on work.
Well, yeah. And there's such a massive change that happens, right? As we, have kids, get married, start killing it in our careers. There's just so much there that draws our attention.
Yep.
It takes time to really check in with ourselves. And know who we are.
And permission to check in with yourself, right? And then if you're checking in, what is that? And, what's the dark corners? And is that worth it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And is it productive? Right? That's the big thing too.
Well, especially when you're getting your accolades and your everything else in business, you just double down on that.
Yeah, 100%. So to go back to your original question, so space, but also I do think some labs would be really good. A lot of these women do have cortisol issues. They might have something called estrogen dominance where their progesterone is low, estrogen is high. That causes a lot of these symptoms. Looking at things like biomarkers like vitamin D, it all plays a role. So it all should be looked at.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And even then, I think when you're saying that, because my wife's going, and she wouldn't mind me sharing this, she's going through that right now. And one of the things we talk about is like, get the diagnostics. So at least it's not that, or it could be something, but now you're eliminating factors so you can move towards the solution.
Yeah. And I think too, sometimes it's helpful for women to know there's more at play here. It's not all in their head because a lot of people, men and women combined, sometimes they go to a practitioner and they're told, well, your labs are normal. There you go. And they're like, wait, but I don't feel normal. So it's nice to also have some direction and to see some of these more advanced biomarkers that can point out things that might be less than optimal.
Okay, that's great.
So, yeah.
One more question regarding the wives, and this question comes up a lot for the men, is the idea of their wives being pre-menopausal or menopausal.
Yeah.
And so this it's come up in our community a lot lately where the guys are like, I think my wife might be menopausal. What the heck do I do? Right?
Well, that's a big question. How much time do you have?
I mean, we could do a whole nother episode, and I'm open to that.
Do that.
But first of all, how would a man know if his wife is menopausal?
Yeah.
Second question on top of that is, and I know this is a huge topic, and I've done a ton of research on it myself to help these guys, and I talked to my wife about it because she coaches women, is what are some of the things a guy can do that are positively help their wife navigate this?
Yeah, great questions. So some of the top ways to know, so let me just define kind of what those terms are. So premenopausal is going to be before any of those hormonal fluctuations really start. So pre going through menopause. Menopause, the definition means that a woman has not menstruated for a full year. So postmenopausal, you are going to basically have not menstruated for that full year. And the average age is around 50, 51 for that. And then there's perimenopausal. So perimenopausal is going to be a lot of hormonal fluctuations that are happening. And that is really as a woman transitions from kind of these childbearing years into getting closer to menopause, but she's still having her cycle. Sometimes her cycle is irregular. She's having a lot more hormonal fluctuations. And I would say, by and large, this is kind of earlier 40s up until kind of earlier 50s is when these changes will start. Sometimes as early as later 30s for some women. And really, a lot of times there can be things like more breast tenderness they might complain of, more irregular cycles, as I said, because those hormones are fluctuating so significantly. Women might feel like they're gaining weight in their midsection that doesn't make sense. Like sometimes, they're doing all the things they've always done to stay in shape and their body's just changing and they don't know why. And then a lot of times too, sleeplessness. So feeling more anxiety, not sleeping well, especially the week before menstruation. So kind of that pre-cycle time. Usually the time when most men are like, ooh, you're about to have your period, aren't you? So those are just some of the definitions there. I would say ways men can support these women are really, just saying, hey, I know, I understand you're going through this and I love you. Like it's fine if you gain a little weight or what have you. Just maybe not necessarily just saying that, but showing her, right, that you still very much love her. Because I think a lot of times too, these women their self-esteem kind of plummets during this time because they feel like they have all these crazy emotions. They feel like they don't have control over their emotions. They're not sleeping. They feel kind of crazy. Yeah. And so having their man say, "Hey, I love you," that's huge.
Oh, it is absolutely. And I think it's important for the guys to understand that it's so the guys talking to guys might say, she's crazy. Mm-hmm. She knows totally feels crazy. She feels it and she's embarrassed about it. She has shame about it, typically. Yeah. And whenever there's shame and guilt, that loop comes in. Yep. And sometimes that can manifest to anger, right? Because if it's not encouraged or talked about, it gets brushed under.
Yeah. And also these men just saying, how can I help? Like, I understand this is hard. Like, what can I do? You didn't sleep last night. Maybe help pack the kids' lunches that morning. Just do a little bit of extra stuff. And for these women, oftentimes they want guidance too. Oftentimes, I'm a big fan of bioidentical hormone replacement when it is indicated and necessary. Mm-hmm. That can really help kind of ease that transition. And then also gut health, looking at stress, all of those foundational pieces we've been talking about come into play.
Awesome. I know what you're talking about when you talk about hormone replacement. Can you tell the guys a little bit more what you're...
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a big fan of bioidentical hormone replacement. There's actually hormone replacement therapy out there that is not actually bioidentical to a woman's natural hormones. And when I say hormone replacement therapy, I basically mean giving things like testosterone, DHEA, progesterone, which is a sex hormone, and estrogen, which is a sex hormone. So when women go through kind of that transition, they oftentimes will have fluctuating hormones. So repleting some of those lower levels can be really helpful to kind of just smooth things out.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you so much again for all
you're so welcome.
that you've done for us. Thanks for being here.
Happy to. It's been fun.
For men that want to find more information about you, your practice, and what you guys do, where can they go?
Yeah, so our website, shiftfunctionalmed.com is a great place to go. And then also Instagram, so shift.functional.med. And then I'm also going to be launching a personal Instagram on top of that, Dr. Marie Agnew. And so there are quite a few places to come into contact with us.
I love it.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, as we always say in the moment of insight, take massive action. And this is your time to really take action on your health. Be proactive. I mean, all of us have stuff going on, guys, don't we? And so not only be reactive to those things and take care of them now, because you don't know when later is going to happen, but be proactive. And if you don't work with Marie, that's fine. She will say the same thing.
Absolutely.
Get some help and move out there. Get your diagnostics, understand what's going on. You do it in your business, do it in your health too, right? You want to be around for a long time. You, like me, we want to walk our daughters down the aisle. We want to be there for our sons. We want to be there for our families. And it starts with you taking care of your health. Until next time, we'll see you on The Powerful Man Show.